The leaders of France and Germany say the European Union needs a tough new treaty to deal with the eurozone debt crisis.
French President Nicolas Sarkozy and Germany's Angela Merkel made the announcement just days from a key meeting of all European leaders about that region's crippling debt problems. Economist Oliver Hartwich from the Centre for Independent Studies in Sydney joins us now. Oliver Hartwich, good morning. Both Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy were talking about this new treaty they want implemented by early next year. As you see the situation, is that going to be politically feasible?
Well, they may well get a new treaty, but I think it won't really end the euro crisis, because actually they already have a treaty. It's called the Growth and Stability Pact. And that pact has been in force for 15 years and nobody's played by the rules. So the question is really, why should they play by even stricter rules in the future?
Even though this new treaty, according to the French and German leaders, will have tough sanctions applied to any country that ramps up big budget deficits.
Yeah, but the problem is that you first have to implement that treaty at the national level. So the Germans are currently talking about something that they call the debt brake. So there are constitutional limits to running big budget deficits, and these constitutional limits have to be implemented nationally. The Germans have already done that, but in France, for example, that's hugely controversial. And it is quite unlikely that Nicolas Sarkozy will get it through before the presidential elections. And the opposition in France has already made it clear that they're not supporting such a move. So I think it is quite difficult to implement these big treaty changes at the national level in time.
So essentially what you're saying, and you're right about the situation in France with the election coming up, issues of national sovereignty will potentially override the greater good for the European region.
Well, there are big issues with national sovereignty. I mean, one of the issues that's currently discussed between Germany and France is, for example, the involvement of the European court system, that the European courts should actually monitor the implementation of debt breaks and constitutional provisions for fiscal stability. And that's quite controversial, of course, because the Germans again push for stricter control on part of the courts, and the French are quite hesitant about that. But in any case, they're not really solving the crisis, because they're only really dealing with one issue of the crisis, and that is debt, public debt. But on top of that, there are several other problems that they need to tackle. They have to tackle the balance of payments crisis in Europe. They have to tackle competitiveness issues in the periphery. And they have to recapitalize the national banks. So it's going to be a very, very difficult process from here on. And I think they're really only dealing with one aspect of the crisis, and they're not doing even that well.
We have various European leaders, Oliver Hartwich, talking ahead of this key summit in Brussels at the end of the week, saying that if the leaders don't get their act together, essentially we'll see the end of the euro. Is that overstating things?
No, certainly not. I think there is a good chance that we may be seeing the end of the euro, at least in its current form, in the next 2 years. I think there is a great possibility, great likelihood of some countries departing, and I think the first country in line to leave the euro would be Greece, probably followed by Portugal. But I think even beyond that smaller breakup, there is the chance of a bigger breakup where the leading countries, so Germany and France, would pull out of the euro eventually. I think the euro crisis is far from over, despite all the talk we're hearing from Nicolas Sarkozy and Angela Merkel. And we shouldn't forget, this is the 14th or 15th summit now in 2 years talking about the euro crisis. It is the 4th or 5th summit this year where they're talking about a make or break summit. And I think so far we have always been disappointed. We'll be disappointed again.
Well, they certainly like to talk. Just before you go, we have the news over the last day or so coming out of Italy of the tough new austerity measures in that country, tax increases, extending the pension age. The new leader, Mario Monti, is even foregoing any salary. But one other issue that a lot of people are missing, I suppose, is that's all very well and good, but the potential for social unrest in a country that is used to that very large social welfare network could be quite intense, couldn't it?
Absolutely, and I think we're really only seeing the first steps in this reform process. If you're just considering that over the past 10 years there has been a wage differential between Italy and Germany opening up to 30%, so that means that the Italians would have to cut back their wages by 30% just in order to restore their competitiveness where it was at the beginning of the century with Germany. You can see the potential for civil unrest, because I think Italians are not likely to take that easily.
Oliver Hartwich, as always, great to speak to you this morning.
Thank you.